Recording.
Okay, it's Chairman Mike McCoo calling to order the Board of Finance meeting for the town of Wellington of October 15th, 2020 at 7:05 p.m. Mercy, you have attendance, I believe, based on what's on the screen here. Okay, just realizing I hadn't turned my cell phone down. I apologize. So we will, hang on, I gotta get my agenda here now. Too many screens. Okay. Call order seating of alternates if needed. We have no alternates on the line, so there will be no seating of alternates. And we do have a quorum. Approval of minutes. The minutes for September 17th. Hang on a second. Yes. The minutes for September 17th are available. I did not find anything in my review. I'll move, for discussion, I'll move we accept them as presented. Matt?
Yeah, I think we should table this. I haven't had a chance to look at them. They came through at 1 or 2 o'clock today, so I haven't had a chance to look at them. So I'll have to abstain because it's not enough time to look at it.
Okay.
I would agree. I didn't see them either. I don't know if they came over on town email, but they weren't in the grouping of information that you sent, Mike. So
Correct. They were later. So we will, I'm going to assume this motion didn't get a second, in which case the motion dies on its own. So I'll make the next motion that we table the minutes until the next meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. Marissa, can you do the roll call, please?
Matt
Aye.
and Christina.
Aye.
Steph.
Aye.
Jeff.
Yes.
Mike.
Aye.
Lisa's here now. I don't know if we can retroactively. I just don't know.
So we can, we have a quorum. Let's see who we missing. We're missing Peter, so we can seat Lisa for Peter. But we have not seated her yet. So she won't vote on this motion.
Right. I just wasn't sure if
Yep.
we could seat her now because we're out of order. But
So is the motion carried? I believe the motion carried, correct?
yeah, sorry, it's all yeah.
Okay, I'm just moving screens here. Okay, so I'll go back to seating of alternates. I move that we seat Elizabeth Wolf for Peter Tanaka. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Can I get a vote?
Stephanie.
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Christina.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Okay. Present to speak. I'll do my little ditty here. Public participation is desired and encouraged. Speakers will be limited to time and appropriateness of comments to maintain progress, stay on topic, and maintain decorum. Is there anyone in present to speak? If you're in video, wave your hand. All right. Anyone who is not showing in video screen, unmute your microphone and call out your name if you'd like to speak during present to speak. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to old business. Public health crisis update, potential effect on municipal budgets. As predicted at our last meeting, the unemployment numbers came out the next day. And I believe, again, this month, we do not yet have the next set of numbers. Maybe they'll come out tomorrow or Monday. So, Erica, can you just give us the quick bullets on what you are aware of for an update on unemployment and Wellington's situation, that kind of thing?
Sure. Again, I'm going back to August numbers in Wellington. So we dropped to 5.9% unemployment rate, which represents 215 individuals in our workforce. And that was down from, I apologize, Mike. I think it was down from close to 8%.
Yeah, 8.1 or 8.2 we hit at one point.
So if the trend continues, you'll have a new number tomorrow.
All right. Anything else from townwide, ear to the ground, any of that kind of thing?
No, we excuse me, haven't. Some numbers have gone down in our food pantry and our food distributions. So that I think is a good sign. Jenny has seen some different families. So there is still some issue there. We'll see what excuse me, happens with the winter time, specifically with a restaurant community.
Right. That certainly is a concern as restaurants have to move indoors and capacity is limited. I do make a point of attending local restaurants a little bit regularly, purely for research purposes. They do seem to be holding their own. I'm not sure, of course, what their balance sheets look like, but there seems to be pretty good activity at the pizza houses, at Hilltop. And I'm not sure about River and Rail. I think they're still not operating with the full hours that they used to operate.
They're not, and I think they may, of our local restaurants, be the one that's struggling the most to open for dinner. Alcohol certainly is an additional draw that some of the other restaurants have that they just don't have. So I don't know if you've noticed that they stopped doing dinner.
Right. Well, and they had not done dinner before the corona,
Correct.
or the virus anyway, right? That was a way to change their business during the virus. So,
and once restaurants opened indoors and were able to offer that, I think it may have affected some of their reasoning for not doing takeout. So I think we may see that restaurant struggling more. So if folks are inclined to go out for breakfast or lunch or takeout, and you're staying local, please consider, adding River and Rail to your schedule of restaurants. So
my
you can
research.
use as much support as possible. Yes, to your research.
Does anyone talk to Hilltop about, as the weather gets cold and how that's going to affect their crowds? Because they've been doing pretty well it looks like, having built out their patio area in the summer and early fall, but from here on out.
I recently heard, and I did not hear it from the owner, I heard it from a patron that was told they were planning to close for the winter. I don't know if that's true. I would hope not. I think that would, obviously hurt him and his workforce, and he was closed through most of the start of this pandemic. So I worry about the ability to open back up again. They expanded their patio, but you can't close it in, and it's considered indoor seating. So they're up to 75% capacity indoors. It's whether or not folks will sit indoors to that capacity.
I did go by tonight and I was impressed. I went by about an hour ago and there was quite a crowd on the patio, even though it's kind of chilly and it's fall. Everyone was bundled up in sweatshirts and enjoying their evening on the patio, but I think that will run out soon. Okay, anyone else have anything on effect on the local budgets? I will also comment, just while I'm remembering it, that I talked to a couple of the local real estate people over the last few days, and real estate is still doing very well. In general, for people to get out of the cities, Boston, Worcester, Springfield, New York, even Danbury, Stamford, all those cities, people have decided they want to get more in the country for to have more buffer space around them, is really boding well for the local real estate market. The biggest challenge the realtors are having right now is that they can't get enough inventory, and the mortgage brokers are having trouble keeping up. Because people are not only purchasing, but people are refinancing too because the rates are so low. 30-year fixed rates are now down under 3%. And the mortgage, I checked in with a mortgage guy the other day, local, and he said that he's already done more refinances this year up to date, up to October 1st, than he did in all of last calendar year. So they're very busy. So they're having trouble keeping up and turning over the paperwork in time for closings. And there are bidding wars going on for properties. So there's a positive sign right there. Anybody else? Okay. We don't know what the future is going to bring. We certainly, can be concerned that this, as we go into the fall and into flu season, that things may change, but I guess we'll try to keep our thumb on it.
Mike, did you, I can share with you what I shared at Board of Selectmen about tax collection. Is this the appropriate time for that? So as reported at our October 5th Board of Selectmen meeting, for the 2019 grand list, we billed $13,304,435, and we had received $7,464,469 through the end of September. That was the extension that went to October 1st, and that represented a 56% collection rate. For comparison's sake, we had a 59% collection rate in 2018. And that amount included $8,039 in fees from July 1 to October 1st. So much better than I think we had anticipated initially. So,
okay. Yep.
Pretty good.
I think all along we've been doing better than we expected. On
Absolutely. And so these final numbers really showed that. So we lost some interest in fees for what we would have typically collected, which I think helped residents. So we're pretty on target with that.
Great. Okay. Moving on to CIP capital funding process, continued discussion. Erica, do you know where we are on a CIP meeting?
The last discussion was they were shooting for still November, looking at in November and pushing it up a month.
Okay, and we still haven't heard anything. You haven't heard anything from the chairman about narrowing in on a date or anything?
No.
I know none of us have been contacted. Okay. All right. So on to the capital funding process. This is sort of a big conversation, and this goes to the information that Matt sent in. Just a note procedurally, we may not have to consider this an RFP. I think we may be able to just issue a task letter because we have the accounting firm on contract and get a price based on the task letter. But I'll ask Donna to chime in on that, but that was the information I understood from her before. And that would expedite the process versus doing an RFP and waiting for multiple firms to give us a price. But of course, in the end, that's up to the board. But anyway, so Matt, do you want to narrate your points a little bit?
Yeah, I just, I came up with 5 points that we could include in a letter to our accounting firm, asking them for an analysis of our financial situation and structuring our fund balances. So like I said, I had 5 of them. I'm getting feedback. I don't know why that is. Has someone got 2 sources of audio going? No, it seems to have stopped. So, what I want them to do is recommend or make some kind of analysis on structuring our accounts so that we don't report a large reserve fund balance. I mean, I don't know what we're at. I've heard many different percentages, but I think it was like 9 or 10% or something like that. I can't recall. So another one is to recommend accounting policies so we reserve against specific assets rather than just having everything in one great big, large capital reserve account. And can they, make recommendations on how to do that? And if we can't do those kinds of things, and we don't want to have a large reserve fund, do they have any recommendations for spending down the reserve fund to minimize to a minimum viable level? And what do they recommend as a minimum viable level? And that's open to interpretation. It's all what this board thinks as well. And then estimate of the, like I said, of the viable reserve fund amount, and then recommendations for government efficiencies. We can strike number 5. I just put that in there. If they run across something that would be efficient and they can make a recommendation about it, fine. That's not a major component of my thinking about what we're asking them to do. It all has to do with structuring the reserves such that we don't have a very, very large reserve balance sitting out there. And then if that's not possible, what's the minimum level they recommend and how we should spend that down.
Thank you. I'll make a comment first. I do agree with 5 being sort of a difficult one to wrap around. First of all, I think it's too broad. It would leave the accounting firm with wondering how much we want them to look into. So either strike it. I think I would recommend we either strike it or we reword it so that it's about the capital process and the reserves and not overall government efficiencies, because that could open up a whole broad area. I like points 1 through 4. I would tweak the wording maybe a little bit because they do seem to be sort of, they're worded on looking at what the minimums are, which I understand why they're worded that way. But sometimes when you bring a firm on to do some consulting, they're taking cues from what you're asking for. And I think we maybe want to be using terms that don't hint as much towards minimal as much as, what is prudent, and be clear on like maybe adding in the concern that we have all been discussing, that a large reserve has disadvantage in other areas, like in negotiating contracts, say, so that they understand the reason why we're going for it, as opposed to trying to interpret a hint that we want to be as minimal as possible.
I think those are good comments. Thanks.
Other comments? We're waiting for you to unmute, Stephanie.
I just had a question about Matt, for Matt. Could you articulate a little bit what your philosophy is for doing this, or what your reasoning is?
We had comments from the public indicating that in past years, when entering into negotiations, union negotiations, the moderator of the negotiations has indicated that with such a large reserve fund balance, that Wilmington can afford to meet or exceed any kinds of pay demands or needs or wants that the unions put up. So, if you, it's hard to say, oh, we can't, meet your needs for a 5% raise or whatever it is, when we have, multiple millions of dollars sitting dormant in an account in reserve.
Okay. Well, I have a couple things about it that I'd like to say, if it's okay, Mike, or
Yes, please.
whatever.
This is a discussion.
Well,
Yep.
Well, the main objection I have to doing this, and I have some general questions, like, is the auditing firm the one with the most expertise to address these particular questions, which we can talk about. But my main issue is, that I think one of our strongest goals should be transparency in government. And I feel like this is not doing that. I also think, frankly, having the fund balance handled the way it is now, and I think in the past it might have been handled in a different way, and it was confusing to even the people doing the budgeting. Or, you know, I'm not talking about Donna, I'm talking about the rest of us. So, you know, but just in general, I think being transparent about our government and what we're doing with taxpayer money is really important, especially for the citizens, but also for town departments and other boards and people who are trying to understand what we're working with. I think they shouldn't have to add up separate sums to know what the town financial health picture is. I also think there's a little danger getting a little too frittered out and earmarked so that when something comes up that we really want to do, we've got money in the wrong funds. So I think as for it being a vulnerability in union negotiations during teacher and town union contract negotiations, I'm pretty sure the unions we work with are well aware that we're a small frugal town and that therefore we often have but we do often have a significant fund balance. And I think more important, if there's any time to consider bringing our teacher and staff pay more in line with competing towns, it's now. And I just want to make my case for that. We've lost some real talented staff to other towns after training them here. And some key educators in the last year. The teachers have been just doing huge amounts of work to tailor their teaching to the three systems. They have to use virtual, in-person, and hybrid classroom dynamics. I know a lot of teachers and these demands just don't fit into their normal hours that easily, and they break their necks to answer that call from our families. I see red heart signs all over town, and I think that's a real sweet gesture of appreciation. But I think the town, particularly in the next contract, should be open to going beyond that and making a stronger statement to our teachers. So I'm really glad, for instance, that we gave the registrars a raise in the last budget year. Because they're working their tails off and this is so unforeseen. Well, it's not really totally unforeseen because we knew it was going to be a presidential, but the things they're dealing with and what everybody's dealing with COVID and everything, I just think, I don't have a full steam ahead feeling about the proposal to pursue this.
I'd just like to make a comment on that, Stephanie. I think your comments are well taken and I completely agree, but I think that drifts us a little off topic. The value of the teacher contract and the teachers is really not the topic here. That's an example of why we need to determine if we're handling the taxpayers' funds prudently, in my mind. And my understanding of how we got into this and why we're talking about it is to have an expert give us some feedback. The feedback we've had so far from the accounting firm is that we are in a better financial position than most towns because we've been careful. But this is a little more specific. And to present them with that example would be giving them the reason why we want to look into this. And they may say, you're doing the right thing. What you're doing now is the prudent thing. And if it does cost you some extra in a teacher's contract or a negotiation, that's a reasonable price to pay in how these things work in typical municipalities, or maybe they won't say that. So I think in my mind, that's how this conversation got rolling. And as we were trying to come up with ideas of how do we talk about capital and how do we define the difference between, say, deferred maintenance and a true capital item, that we would get some expert opinions and not necessarily ask them to restructure things for us, just to give us some ideas. So I guess I see it a little more focused on what we call our accounts and how we distribute or define that fund balance.
Well,
those people are smart. They'll know that we still have that amount of money. And you're also right that we have to be careful we don't earmark things in places where we trap the money.
right. Well, I agree with.
We're looking for some expertise.
I was okay, and I don't disagree with that general idea of doing that. I'm addressing partly what the motivation for proposing this in the first place is, and I think we should be comfortable talking about that openly. And on CIP, I recommended, I think 2 years ago, that we increase the pool incrementally every year more than we have, because we've gotten into, you know, lease creep, and that's kept us from being able to, you know, to take care of other things in town that need to be handled by the capital plan. So I do feel that that's a strong trajectory to pick up now that, you know, the whole CIP budget was kind of upended with the COVID and the shutdown and everything. But when we get back on track with CIP, I feel like it's time to resurrect that idea, and that money would come, you know, by way of the fund balance, I'm thinking. So I don't know if it also needs another capital fund there, but, you know, but again, I guess I'm kind of discussing some of the possibilities that, you know, we haven't really gotten expert advice on yet. So I do understand that. I think there are other offshoot fund ideas besides capital if we are going to go down this road, though, like schools upkeep, not the, you know, not the major projects that fall under CIP, but as part of some of the things Matt's brought up before is, why are we doing maintenance projects in CIP? And, you know, if that's a concern, then maybe we need, you know, an MBR fund, or a, you know, a school upkeep fund, or something for overall town maintenance as part of this, if we're thinking that way.
I think that's in this discussion. Yes, absolutely, I agree. Other board comments? Okay, so I had a couple of thoughts on the first 4 bullet points. And just for an example, I'm not making a motion right now, this is just discussion. For an example, in item number 1, my thought was adding the word capital, recommendations for structuring Willington capital accounts. And then I struggled a little bit with the wording of not reporting a large reserve. And I was trying to come up with wording that was not worded in the negative so much. So recommendations for structuring Willington capital accounts so that we report an appropriate reserve balance or something to that effect. So I guess, you know, if people care to have a discussion about how we word this, I would like to try to get something that we have consensus on and get a price back get a task letter out and get a price back from the accounting firm, so that next month we can decide if we're going to spend that money, because then we're going to be into capital.
Well, Mike, I know you have accounting bloodlines. Are they the right people to go to for this?
Well, I think first of all, they're on contract with the town already.
Right.
They do a full suite of municipal accounting services. You know, the firm that we're talking about that's on the town contract and does our audits. And I believe that they are the right type of firm to answer this question, to advise us. They're already commenting on our capital balances compared to other towns, and they do a lot of other towns, so they would have that broad experience.
Mm-hmm.
You know, might say, well, we've found it's been very successful in town XYZ to handle building maintenance, large maintenance projects in this way, and true capital is called this, or whatever. That's my hope.
Okay.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I would like to leave in like the estimate of the minimum viable reserve fund amount. I'd like to know what their recommendation is on that. I mean, if we're holding, essentially what we're doing is we're overtaxing people. And it's a question of how much are we going to overtax them. And if they come back and say, yeah, we don't think, you know, we really don't need to have that much. You know, here's an improvement level. Then we can take that into consideration. It's not saying that we have to make a change. We consider it. I think we should leave that in. As far as the recommendations for number 5, we can delete that. I'm open to finessing the language, Mike. If you think that it's more appropriate to go at it in a softer way, that's fine with me.
Well, in 5, I don't think we can go that broad. I think that leaves way too much unknown, because I think the accounting firm's going to reach right back and say, how much of your government do you want us to look at?
Yeah. So we delete 5.
About capital or reserve.
Is there a, I'm just asking this, is there another town oversight group that looks at these kinds of things that Donna works with, or
You thinking like a
sort of an
CCM or something?
yeah, or something under them or whatever that specializes in municipal, financial analysis of municipal spending?
Donna, do you want to weigh in on that? If you're with us.
They probably have benchmarks.
It doesn't seem Donna is with us at the moment.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I think I'm unmuted now.
There you go.
So no, there is no subcommittee that I work with on financial analysis.
Donna, do you know, is there any resource within something like CCM that would provide guidance on how capital is typically done, or recommended practices on reserve or capital?
No, I don't know.
Okay. Thank you, Donna. Donna, also a quick question. To the comments or the concern about, is this the right firm to talk to since you work with them? Am I on track in what I said before about this firm? This is their
Yes,
meat and potatoes.
yes, this is their thing.
Okay, thank you. Christina?
Wasn't it the accountants who told us the recommendation for keeping it between 8 and 12%? Didn't we find that out last year?
They helped us write our fund balance policy,
Yeah.
and I think they probably did recommend between 8 and 12% as a policy.
Yeah, and I think I'm just remembering that meeting that they went into a little bit of detail about why, you don't want to have too little because that's not good if we ever need to go out to bond, and you don't want to have too much because that's just, we're overtaxing people. So, but then it falls to us to figure out how to get to that, and that's what we do. But I don't know that they can tell us like specifically what we need to do to get there.
They can.
Mike, could we just get a recap of what the fund balance is and what percentage it is for this fiscal year?
Donna, do you have that handy? And I apologize, I forgot to ask Donna to produce that general fund report that we've looked at the last couple of months. That was my fault.
Yeah.
I was looking for it in email tonight thinking, well, Donna didn't send me that report. And then I remembered I didn't ask her for that report.
Okay, so I'm looking up my notes from budget time to see what we had for a fund balance. I think it may have been above 12%.
It was.
It was.
It was 16.9. So it was almost 17.
I thought we cut it back.
I think we did too, because when we were reducing, that groundswell of reduction in the mill rate.
Yes. Yeah.
Went down a little, went down some.
Yes. We did roll it back. We got it down closer towards the 12.
But it was still 13 or 14.
I'm not sure I can dig it up even with 3 screens. I don't think I can dig that up fast enough. Donna, do you have any live look into it to see what it looks like?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But I think you're right, because I remember we did the additional appropriation for the plow truck. And then we did the $410,000 application to the fund balance.
Right.
So we whittled it down,
Yeah,
but I don't know where we landed.
I believe it was Pete Tanaka who had made the motion to bring us into that slight reduction in the mill rate, which
Yep.
if I remember right, it was a number like another $90,000 or something like that at that moment to tip the scales into the reduction. And I feel like it got us somewhere under 13%. Okay, so in the interest of keeping this moving, we either have to come up with consensus on the wording tonight or move it back and forth, suggest wording and get it back out, which would delay us a month in getting it out. So do we want to just try to edit this right now as we're going and see?
So I'd be happy to take a look at it, Mike, and then resubmit for next month. Maybe I can run it by you and get your input, and then do this again next month. I have no problem with that.
Do we, as a board, are we okay with waiting another month because then we'll have to send it and get a price, and then we'll have to approve the price to get them on board.
Yeah, it's October, as long as we do it if we do it in November, and then by December, January, we should be able to have this, have them in to talk to us.
Okay. If that's Erica, go ahead.
Can I ask a question? There is no line item for this. There is no, I mean, you don't have a budget. I'm just curious how it's being paid for and what budget it's coming out of.
We'll have to try to figure that out, won't we?
Yeah.
Should we take it out of the fund balance?
Well, we have to figure out an appropriation. We have to figure out the process. We can do a town meeting and all those things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I want to spend a lot of money on this. I mean, I'm not asking for an audit or anything like that. I'm asking for them to put, 15 hours, reviewing things, and then making some recommendations and suggestions.
I just want to make a point of that you don't have a budget at all outside of your recording secretaries and supplies. So without a budget, where it's going to have to come from someone else's, either taking from a line item that isn't in the Board of Finance's purview, or you're dipping into the general fund for this. So I'm just curious from the budget perspective. We're pretty cautious, Phil, with the Board of Ed budget and us here, how we spend it, and if they're just our dollars. So I think it's something to think about.
Yes, I agree. Well, if there's any board that is responsible for taking a shot at that and sending it to the taxpayers, I guess it's us. So unless there's an objection, if people want to discuss it, Matt and I can confer in the meantime on wording and bring something back to the next meeting. People all right with that? General consensus? Okay, let's
Thank you.
break into the. What's that?
Thank you
Okay.
to you and Matt.
So next agenda item here. Okay. So that was CIP cabinet. Did we have anything else in that? I think that was everything, right? We talked about the CIP process is going to get started next month. Okay. So monitoring current fiscal year budget. Donna, since I did not ask you for the report, or could you just tell us if you're aware of anything unique or anything that's come to your attention that we would need to know about, something that's off the rails?
Nothing uneventful.
It's all uneventful. I like.
Yeah,
Erica, same. Oh, I'm sorry, Donna. Go ahead.
that's it.
Okay, Erica. Anything you're seeing?
No, there's not a whole lot of spending happening here. Donna is working really hard on reimbursements from FEMA and or the CRF that the state has stood up in coronavirus relief funding on things from last fiscal year. So those dollars, when and if we get them, will go into the general fund because they were spent in the last fiscal year. That's really the only thing outside of the norm.
Okay.
So
Still
there's,
in a budget freeze here, so it's only necessary spending.
Eric, is there extra spending on the election just because of
Oh,
all?
yes.
Well, but
Absolutely.
is that's not factored in yet, is it, or is it?
It's not, so the state did allocate funds for town clerks for absentee balloting and for additional poll staff and necessary adjustments. And I believe Donna can confirm we did receive that funds that went into the general fund. There's some confusion to me about, so it goes into the general fund, and then when our budgets are off, and Donna, correct me if this is wrong, that then we're going to have to do transfers to shore up those accounts. But there was money already transferred to the town, 2,500 for registrar voters and 1,800 and some change for town clerks. That doesn't account for the additional staff in the town clerk's office that we have employed. But the Secretary of State's office has made the comment to both registrars and town clerks that they will make us whole on those expenses. So I think they still have some federal funds that they planned to put up to hopefully make towns whole with all of their extra expenses because of that. And we're looking at one additional expense and the possibility of having law enforcement at our poll location this year. So that's something that the registrars came to me with, and we're looking into that. So that may be an additional expense that no one had anticipated until now. Whether or not that would be something the Secretary of State would cover or not, I'm not sure, but I think we all might agree it might just be necessary to have a presence with the tone of things happening currently. But other than that, nothing unusual happening here. That's really the only extra spending. Everyone else is really in a holding pattern.
I do know that Holland has a state trooper at both of their polling places this year.
Holland does, and
Holland.
Coventry will have one, and theirs will be inside and outside, kind of back and forth, so that there's a clear presence at all their polling locations. So Coventry has a police force. Holland has resident state troopers. We have neither of those things, so it would, more than likely be off-duty officers working overtime. So I don't know what the cost for that yet. We just started the discussion.
Okay, and Erica, in the clerk's office, I think you've got some extra staffing running right now too. Is that going to fit within their budget for now and then?
Oh, well, that's not true. Robin thinks she may be able to fit some of it. There were with some staffing changes over there. There may be some funds. Robin kind of stepped into things at a very busy time, so she hasn't been able to give that as much attention. But when she adds up the extra costs, the extra funding that the state gave us, we thought that would go directly into budget. But I'm understanding, Donna, unless that is wrong, that it's not hitting our budget, it hit the general fund instead. So we may find those two departments overspent well before the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah, that's why I was asking that question. All right.
And we still have a referendum, and we don't know what other things could potentially come up between now and the end of the fiscal year. We hope we have a budget referendum this year.
Okay. And then while we're on that, at the last meeting, we had talked about River Road, and there was discussion about how to move to a town meeting. Where does that, and I apologize for not keeping up on selectmen's meetings, but where does?
So the executive order hasn't come out yet with a little bit more clarification on a virtual model. We did have a town meeting. I held it outside. We had 20, I believe we had 22 individuals present. We borrowed a light tower from Mansfield, and the fire department put that up so that we could see. Because by the time we have a town meeting, when folks can actually come, it's now dark outside, so it would get trickier. It would be more difficult to do as it gets colder, although we'd make some changes, certainly learn some things and some additional protocols so that we would pass a microphone so that folks could hear us, and additional cleaning things. But that would become difficult come wintertime if we have to have a town meeting.
So
So we're
was
still
River
waiting for the
Road-
executive order that hopefully is going to give us some clarification on being able to hold a hybrid town meeting.
So was River Road addressed in that town meeting you're talking
It
about?
was. You mean the appropriation of funds from you?
Yes.
You all appropriated funds, yes, and that town meeting was specifically for that item.
Okay,
And it was
somehow I missed all that. I didn't realize it all occurred.
It occurred, it was, I believe 21-1 vote in favor of spending, and so we applied for LoCIP funds, which is where that will come from, and then moving forward.
Okay.
Great.
I apologize that I didn't know that. I
That's
should have,
okay.
I missed it somewhere. Thank you.
Hey, we had
Maybe we
22
could work
folks. It was
something
pretty
out.
good.
Erica, we could work something out on the hilltop patio by the fire if we need to do an outdoor town meeting
If
during.
we
the-
have to, we'd have to take this whole patio, so.
I think we need
Yeah.
more fire so you can get more people close to it.
Some folks that were out at River Road came out to the meeting. They just happened to be walking the track and, you know, were able to come over. Those who were residents were able to come over and vote. So, but middle of January, probably not a good model. So the governor's office has heard repeatedly from municipal leaders that we need some clarification on holding a virtual town meeting. Or some sort of in-person and virtual hybrid. So
Okay.
they keep telling us it's forthcoming. There's a lot of lawyers and FOIA involved in that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else with any questions or comments on monitoring the current year's budget? Okay, let's get to Board of Finance manual policies, etc. Christina, I think, was this the one where you were going to do a little digging?
Yes. And
Have
I
you
did
had
get
time
very
to do
far.
that yet?
I have one of the documents, thank you, Matt, you sent it to me, and Steph also found it. The Board of Finance guide that was written back in the 90s. That's on a couple different town websites, so if you search for it, you can find it. The other stuff, I just need to scan them, I guess, some of the things I have, and I just haven't been able to.
Okay,
It's been a
Is
great.
that the one you mean, Christina?
That one, yes.
We
right.
have copies here if anyone ever needs one.
Yeah, if you search for the keywords on Google, you can find it. I forget, Canterbury, I think might be the town that it's listed on.
Griswold or one of those.
Griswold, yeah.
What does it say, Erica, at the top?
It's the handbook for Connecticut Boards of Finance.
Oh, yeah, I think I sent it to you, Matt.
Jim Buell sent it to me.
The thing is, it is old, but I think it still is relevant, everything in it. It's not like things have changed, but
Sprague is where I found it. I'll send the link to you
Sprague,
guys.
there you go. There you go, Sprague. Place for great steak dinners, right, Christina?
If
Yeah.
you want it up on the website somewhere, we can attach it and put a link to it. If that is helpful for any of you, just let us know, 'cause, you know.
Yeah,
this part of it.
if we could get that up on the website, that'd be very helpful.
Yeah, and then we can probably at some point take a shot at making a Wellington version maybe, so it doesn't look like we're just co-opting Sprague's work.
Well, I mean, they just have it up there. I don't think it's tailored. for them.
It's a statewide document.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. I'm sending it to you guys now. Just
Okay,
to that email you use, Mike. And I'll put,
Yeah,
I'll put.
that
Lisa
has a
on.
lot of the, to get around the problems with the town email. That has a lot of the,
Yeah, let me make sure it's not a document that we can't put up. It has an
Not
author, the Institute of Public Service from UConn. So. have a
I
couple
heard the
paper
word
copies.
public in it. That's good enough for me.
It seems good enough for me, but
yeah, basically all they did, not all they did, but they took the statutes and boiled it down and kind of made it easy to understand how different things apply to our board. So it is
So
useful.
I think Mike Perry's concerns when he was, what that was,
That
Mike-
was me sending it to
he
you.
was on the board was, there was some legitimacy to that when you're a new member on a board, there should be a handbook. You should get handed something this is a guidance document. This is what we do in Wellington. These are our definitions and terms. This is what we call capital. This is what goes in capital. Those kind of things. So I would hope over time, and it's not our highest priority because we have other work to do, but I would hope over time we could work towards having our document. So when someone joins the board, you either hand it to them printed or you give them a link, and you can go to a town document somewhere that says, hey, board member, or hey, citizen, this is what your Board of Finance does.
Like something like our fund balance policy should be in there, right?
Right, or it should be referred to, because that you can find in town policies. But if you look up Board of Finance policies in the policies thing, you don't really find any comprehensive list or anything.
Okay.
You find keywords that hit on things.
By the way, this handbook for Connecticut Boards of Finance was put together by a UConn extension professor for a public service project. So,
Right.
and that's why it dates back to 92, I guess.
And not to be a stick in the mud, but something put out by the University of Connecticut in 1992 does not make a policy, does not make a procedure. It's a guideline. It's a great tool. It's a resource. But
Just the handbook.
what did you do? Why did you do it? Who said you can do that? It's almost irrelevant. It's relevant to the point where you could say this is the standard of the industry.
Well, I think this is really like boilerplate, dumbed down language of the statutes.
Right.
So if any of them have changed and updated since 1992, they wouldn't necessarily be in here. But it's a pretty good guide if you took statutes along with the information in here as to what your board should be doing. Your policies are different.
Right.
The other document that I have, which is, I don't know if you can see it. It's called the Description of Town of Wellington Funds for the Wellington Board of Finance's Use in Annual Budget Preparation.
Some sort of a landscape picture.
Yeah, and it was created by Chapita Lyons when she was on the board in 2011. And the version I have still says draft. So I don't know that the board ever approved this or if it's actually completed. And Donna might know, where the electronic version of this lives. And maybe that's something.
Chapita.
Yeah, she probably is the one. But what it has is the fund numbers and then the name of the fund, what type it is, like, is it a general revenue? Is it a capital? Is it a special revenue? And then what the purpose of it is and what some notes are about that specific one. And this comes in handy when we're doing CIP planning. I use it all the time because I can't remember, which one is Fund 7? Why are they talking about that? And what are the special things about Fund 7? She totally figured it all out and made it easy to understand. But it is, what I have is a draft, so I don't know.
What year did you say?
2011.
It'd be great if I could get a copy of that.
From her specifically, was that handed out in 2011?
Yeah, so she presented this to, when she was on the Board of Finance, she did this and she presented it to the board. And I don't know that they ever approved it.
But I didn't get one of those. So what I'm trying to say is, do you have like the only copy that she was working off of, or did she give out 7 copies that night?
I think probably. Yeah, I don't know how I have a copy.
So that's interesting. No, but I do remember her working on something.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that this is literally the thing I got at the meeting that night and I just held on to it. And but maybe we need to look at it, make sure it's updated and approve it if it wasn't ever approved.
And we have permission to do that from her? You think that was draft, or is that really something that was put into practice?
It was put into practice.
Okay.
Yeah, and she created it for the Board of Finance.
Yeah,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
Great. That's really good stuff.
But Donna Latinsik, your name is on here at the bottom too. She said, well, she just has her name and Donna's name. But I don't know. Donna, do you have it anywhere? Like,
Yes, I have it, and I believe I have it electronically.
And did they ever approve it or?
No, the board did not vote to approve it.
Oh.
It's just a dictionary of
Mhm.
sorts. And it was never approved.
Hey,
And
Donna,
do you think it's even changed since 2011? Have we added any funds to it since then? Maybe the gun range fund.
I believe the last fund we added was the non-lapsing fund. So that may not be in there
I don't think so.
in the dictionary.
Mhm.
But otherwise, that's a great resource.
It's awesome.
Okay, so in the meantime, before the next meeting, Christina, you'll work with Donna and find out what she
Yeah.
electronically so we can start to gather these things into one place. Maybe we can come up with a working folder somewhere,
Mhm.
folder that we can have access to.
Yep. Yeah, that's really the only thing that I have that I know of that I have been using personally.
Okay,
Keeps just to keep organized, but yeah.
thank you. That is progress. Anybody else with comments or thoughts on this topic?
We're lucky to have Chipita.
Yeah.
Right.
She was-
Okay, next topic on the agenda, annual report previous years. After our last meeting, I got an email from Erica. She was able, through our internet provider, to get access to the former chairman's email inbox to extract some reports. I still have to work with Erica to get a couple reports, and we need to send out, I'll also be sending out the standard letter to all of the groups for the report from the fiscal year that just ended. So that ends old business.
So, Mike, were there some on that list that you needed copies of? I sent you the list. of what
Yes, I
can see in
believe
the
so.
email.
I didn't, let me go back to the email and see.
Okay.
Yeah, I will go back and look at that and I'll verify what we have or don't have. Because I had also gotten some in the meantime from, like Mike D'Amato had found the previous edition and sent it to me also.
Yeah, what I didn't see was a lot of the ones you guys were talking about. And I think the library board discovered that
Yep.
nothing had been done from them,
Yep.
even for the last one that was approved. So, yeah, okay. Just let me know, because when we're
Sure.
done with that, I'll have them turn off that account.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so on to new business, Wellington Public Schools. Item 1A in new business is the CES and HMS ventilation. Phil, you've put up with an hour of us. You're on.
Good evening. Thanks for having me on the agenda tonight. So as part of the reopening plan that was put out by the Connecticut State Department of Education, we have to comply with the Department of Public Health's requirements for well-ventilated buildings. I will be honest, my prediction that was today that I thought everyone would be going remote by, and we're still in session, and I hope we continue to do so. However, we know that improving ventilation in the schools is one of the safeguards for the health and safety of our kids and our staff during this pandemic. So we've already completed a lot of smaller projects to improve ventilation, but we have some issues. Center School has 2 classrooms that need ventilation in the upper wing. They are off of, and Mike, you can correct me here, it's off of the addition. It is the last 2 classrooms closest to where the portables would have been by the dirt parking lot. I believe that's where the 2 classrooms were added. There was no ventilation extended out there, so no fresh air intake and no exhaust, which is what they're looking for. And the rest of that wing, we've done a bunch of projects already at both schools to improve ventilation, but the rest of that building is fine. It's just those 2 classrooms. We paid for, we were told we needed to have a ventilation, basically inspection and review that Colliers came out and did for us. Professionals came out. And one of the things that they recommended was to basically mount box fans and have the fan blowing out the window. So when you drive by any of our schools right now and you see a fan in the window, it is our exhaust, and that is exhausting the air out of the classroom and with the window open. And that is a simple solution. And what they basically say is that's a great solution while the weather allows for that to happen. As you can imagine, that as the weather gets colder and we have those 40-degree nights, those classrooms are cold. But right now, that is the only ventilation in those rooms. The cost to complete that project at Center is around $8,000. And this is all stuff that's not budgeted. All school is significantly more complex. It's complicated and a lot more expensive. The wing that was built in the 50s, when you're facing Hall School, it's the wing all the way to the left, which is the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade wings where all of our classrooms are. They have nothing. They have no exhaust, no duct work, no fresh air intake. It was just not required in the 50s. And so when we did our inspection, we started walking those classrooms, we were pretty shocked by that. So again, those classrooms have windows open with fans in them to improve ventilation. We've done quite a bit of research to figure out the most cost-effective solution, which we believe we've landed on installing their individual energy recovery ventilators. And one would have to go into every classroom. Mike, I don't know if you have any experience with any of these, with any of your projects. We spoke to 2 professionals, different companies, about options. This was by far the most cost effective. It takes some significant electric work to be done as well. Basically what happens is they create a hole in the wall of every classroom. And if they can do it above the ceiling tiles, they will. And they basically put in picture a split air conditioning unit. And they put that unit right into the wall. If they can do it above the ceiling tiles, they will, and then vent it into the room. So basically you see on the outside of the building, you'd see those vents. I'm not going to say it's pretty, but I've been told that it is at least 50% cheaper than putting duct work in all of those classrooms, upstairs and downstairs, and installing proper ventilation units on them. This would solve the problem. Again, I'm not saying it's pretty. It's a reasonable solution. And again, by 2 separate companies who do this type of business. So we had just a ballpark done, and the ballpark for this project is $100,000. And this is not in CIP. This is a bit of a shocker, but it's one of those things that I think to be able to stay open, schools need to have proper ventilation. Just the discussion you were having about restaurants in the wintertime, a short time ago, this is the same conversation. And so we've been lucky so far, but basically the Board of Ed is requesting that the Board of Finance basically allow $135,000 to complete both of these projects. And the reason why the 135 is their ballparks until we get those firm numbers, and this would have to go out into an RFP. It would have to go to a town meeting. It's like our hands are tied until that happens. So we're closing our windows at night on those cold nights. And the reason why we really can't leave those windows open is because our heating units that run the hot water right through those areas, will freeze our pipes, and we'll have a bigger issue on our hands.
Right.
So, sorry to spring this on you. This is a bit of a biggie, but it's something that for proper ventilation to stay in school during COVID, it's something that it kind of drove the superintendents crazy, because this was a paragraph in a 55-page report with one link to Department of Public Health's requirements. And when you click on it, it's another 50-page document, and 50 pages, but it's extensive, and you have to meet their requirements, and
That's right.
So go ahead, Matt.
So Phil, when does that requirement need to be met?
So it's basically as soon as we can. It's the question is really around how long can we leave our windows open, and what's the temperature of those classrooms going to be when we hit winter? And it's, we close them at night, but during the day, you have to have a proper temperature in your classrooms, and we just be thumping the heat. I don't even know if it'll work.
So Phil, in the ballpark estimates that you got, or the discussions you had with the firms, did they give any indication of timeline?
So this center school is fast. The center school project can happen pretty quickly. It's a unit that's pretty available. The fact that these are individual units, the good thing about them is that if we clear this process and we can get them going, they can do one room at a time, which really helps us because it allows them to move quicker as opposed to disrupting multiple classrooms at once. So, I don't know what the timeline will be, but we have to move as fast as we can basically on it. So if you approve it, I write the RFP and it goes out tomorrow.
Well, did I misunderstand that you said 8,000 for the center school?
Center schools is very, it's much easier because it's an individual rooftop unit. The duct work that is in up to the other classrooms will then just be extended into the two that are not touched. So because these are kind of ballpark numbers, I put a 20% on top is what I've done. But yes, $8,000 was the number I said for center.
Okay.
That cost, and one of the things that's part of that cost, Steph, is that we have to cut the roof open, and we have to have the right company do it to maintain our warranty on that roof.
Okay. And then I also wondered, is there anything about the Hall Memorial Foundation people about the issue of uglifying Hall?
I mean, we could talk to them. We've maintained that building for forever. I mean, the other option is the rooftop units. You are looking at huge numbers, and again, significant work. It's just that building doesn't have the electric for this capacity. So, you're looking at $20,000 and $30,000 just of electric work alone, I would assume. And that's the ballpark that we've heard. And they can, this is so bizarre, but you can try and beautify the front, where the exhaust comes out. But it's not great.
Phil, is this a reimbursed expense, or is this an expense that we're just going to have to eat it and fund it ourselves?
Good question, Matt. So it's not a reimbursable item. However, so we have 2 grants out at the state right now that are COVID related. One is the ESSER grant, which is $60,000. That grant is a lot more flexible. And then we have the CRF grant Erica was referring to earlier, that and I'll tell you the way that we quote unquote got this money, what we applied for. We were given a generic survey, all superintendents were. We had no idea what it was. We just had to estimate what our reopening funds, what we thought we would be spending. And magically it turned into a grant number for us. Our initial number came in at 140,000, and it is now 200,000. I don't know that we're going to get all 200,000. However, I have put this project into those grant funds to try and cover as much as possible. I just don't know what's going to be approved, because literally as of today, I got an email today and they've adjusted. Superintendents were really disappointed. That's how money was allocated. There are some districts that got $7,000 and there's some districts that got $500,000 plus. And people didn't really know that that's what they were applying, what they were applying for. So
we're getting,
go ahead.
140.
We're getting 200. So the 200, we're getting the 200 plus the 60,000, which is the ESSER grant. All of that money, I will tell you, will cover our costs for reopening and staying open without absolutely decimating our budget through December. And the cost that's in our budget that we're getting hit, as you can imagine, is any of the PPE and cleaning stuff. We know the rate we're going through soap right now. We've basically spent both those budgets, and we've already done a lot of ventilation projects just to, hey, put a new belt on. That was all part of the Collier's report. And so this could be covered by that. I just don't know yet if it will be.
So you're not sure. We're getting 260, but we don't know exactly how much of that is earmarked already to be spent. We don't know how much we're going to be able to reimburse or cover the ventilation expense.
Correct. And this is, to a degree tied to the next item on the budget too. I unfortunately we just got an email today. I will give you an example. So we thought we were going to be opening in a hybrid model where half of our students would be, in on Monday, Tuesday, and the other half would be on Thursday, Friday. Wednesday would be a cleaning day. Because we're small and we had such a large number of students choose remote learning either way, we opened full. So we had put in that we thought we were going to need money for extra buses, because to run a hybrid model, we could only have, I think they were saying 10 or 12 kids on a bus. So we put in that we thought we were going to need funding for buses, and they gave us $70,000. Well, I don't need the $70,000 in transportation now. I need it in items like this. And so that's where the email we just received today is allowing us now, if people were received money in transportation, we are now allowed to move it into a different area that's connected to basically health and safety, and this falls into that. So I'm hoping that it would cover it.
So certainly the idea of ventilation in general in the industry is not a surprise. And as you hinted to, code now would require it anyway. There's significant long-time understanding that fresh air ventilation is critical to building health and the health of the people that are in it. So the idea of getting ventilation, there's no question it's the right idea, and especially in these unique circumstances. So my question to you is, did you by any chance rough out a motion with Donna, or come up with, did you come up with something to throw in front of us as an idea of I know you do. I'm getting to you.
I didn't, Mike, and the reason why is because I'm not sure the best way to tackle this, because I'd love to say we're going to pay for it through all of grants. I just can't wait for them to make these decisions on these grants. Time is really of the essence right now. Once we got the first grant in, and we are now going to be staying open as long as we can. Obviously, that was the plan all along. I don't know if you want to make, we would make the priority the number, right? You work within that number, and whatever we can pay for out of the grant is what you would pay for out of the grant. I think I'm just trying to compare this to a reimbursable, and this is back to Matt's question, is when you go to town meeting and you put out a number, part of that number, if you said $500,000 for a project and part of that number was reimbursable, it doesn't matter. You put out the number $500,000.
Right.
You might get 250 back, but you still put out the number 500. So if you were to go to town meeting with up to $135,000 for this project, and to be quite honest with you, I might break these out three ways. One is the center school one. I don't need it. It's a totally separate project. I could separate that out, but we could break out the Hall School project to see if we can get the electric cheaper, because you might get a better deal by saying mechanical is one portion of the RFP and the electric is another, but it's the same pocket of money to work with. We might get a company that puts a bid in that has the capacity to do both, but we might get someone that can do the electric that's a little bit lower, and someone that can do the mechanical and save some money. Matt's shaking his head. That's not my choice either, Matt. It makes me a little nervous, to be honest with you, because one person's then responsible for the work, and I'll be honest, we live this with the oil tank.
Right.
And one
Okay.
company installed the oil tank at Hall, and another one installed the boiler, and there's pointing at each other like it's your fault, it's not working efficiently yet. So
Okay, I want to get to Lisa's question. She had her hand up next.
So I just wanted to find out, Phil, if, I don't know what it looks like, but the units that go outside the building, and you said they don't look very attractive, how much of the material is outside of the building and how much will it weather? And will it be working in a year? Like, I understand that there is the guidance from DPH that you need to start a ventilation project and show the safety and wellness for the children. But, you know, as Matt said, the timeline, I mean, I'm certain that the state of Connecticut would be more interested in doing something that wouldn't create a further hardship. And, you know, having some planning put to it, especially since you just talked about your oil tank and your boiler. You know, I'm sort of familiar with facilities myself, and I think you, even with grant money, can start a project and have some timeliness to it and have some thought to it and some more engineering prowess to it. Because you want to do it right. You don't want the town to have to come back and have to fix it. So it seems a little too rushed for me. Since you're, you know, how are you going to go through? Are you going to end your semester in December and be off until February? You don't know. You don't know if you're going to be back in school, not until March. So because I'm familiar with this, you know, I think it seems to be too much of a rush job for facilities, in my opinion.
So I can give you a sense of what, Erica, can you allow me to share my screen?
I'm pretty sure I can. Can you just have to ask?
It just says host
Hold
disabled
on.
for screen sharing.
1 second.
Yeah, Erica,
All
if you click that
participants.
little
I'll
arrow.
try again.
There we go. So just to give you a sense, this is, you should be able to see this.
Mm-hmm.
This right here is basically, this would be on the inside. This is an ERV. This happens to be a heat recovery unit, but they're energy recovery units. And then this would be on, so it's basically the same thing on the outside. So you make the hole in the wall, you know, there would be two pipes like this on the outside. And one of the recommendations you can do is actually put a type of hood over it to kind of cover it some, so it's a little more concealed into the side of the building.
Just like a roof unit has a hood. Yep.
Exactly. You could put something on, but just to give you a sense of
So
what they look like.
some protection to it, but
Yeah.
and basically what they're saying to you is you can't pipe up through the ceiling because of Hall School. So we're going to make ways for you to pipe out through the sides, and that's what's going to show.
Well, right, we could pipe up through the roof, but you're gonna have to do ductwork that entire way, and
And you also have your fire safety that you're going to have to. It's going to be one of those bone of contention, which guys ruined which thing, but
correct. And these, from what I understand, is that installing these, they have to be tied because we have to be able to, in a fire, we have to be able to shut down our air handlers.
that's right.
These have to be tied to that. So each individual unit would have to be tied to this. So, you know, what does my time frame look like? I think is part of your ask. We've spent a lot of time trying to just research what's the best, and I'm not the only superintendent doing this
Right.
paperwork. This basically what I would do is if you approve it, I would put out the RFP and probably commit to it prior to, you know, to town meeting, which is not the best protocol or practice, but I think it needs to happen one way or the other. Unless you say don't, you know, wait on that, and I can see Erica's face. I know I'd have to. It's in the grant, and that's where I'm stuck. I just don't. I don't know the next step to move it along at the pace it needs to be moved along.
But I mean, so it's just for me as a Board of Finance member and a taxpayer in town, and somebody who is very pro growing our town responsibly, you know, to me, also the vaccine. It's like, all these things are right around the corner. And so you start to do a project like this and you have grant money in front of you. It just seems to me that, it just seems like at the end of this in June of 2021, would we be saying, geez, we should have done this or we should have done that? Instead of just being like, we got the money, let's just do it. Because to me, we're almost in November. And you don't know if you're gonna get through the whole winter. And the kids have to be able to breathe well when they haven't for almost 50 years. I mean, it just is a little bit, and we all had talked about the school and building another school and how, which is not part of this conversation. But I just think that, I don't know, it just seems a little bit too, I don't know, it just seems a little too quick. Like, I think, I'm not here saying we shouldn't do that. I'm just not, I just am so familiar with facilities that I
see you, Matt.
Yeah, it doesn't sit well. Because I'm also familiar with DPH. And I know you have to start.
Do we have an option? I mean, I don't.
Point well taken. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, do we have an option, Phil? I mean, do we have to do this? Do we not have to do it?
It's the guidelines say, while you can leave your windows open, what do you do if you don't have ventilation? They're not saying that.
But they're not saying you have to create hardship either.
True.
Okay, so if we were thinking about a motion, I'm looking for some input from board members here. I'm thinking the motion is going to look something like approving, we would have to approve the full amount from a source within the budget, and add some sort of a sentence in there that addresses the potential of the reimbursement through the grants, that all available grants will be applied to the reimbursement. What are people thinking?
I think that makes sense. I guess the question I have of Phil is, let's I'm thinking about what Lisa said, but what if we did hold off on this? Are we, number one, we'd be undermining the health of the kids, right? According to, during COVID, the ability to spread it around. But how long could we, is there any other workaround on heat? There probably isn't, right? The issue is we're getting really close to your having the windows open all day is not going to work as a learning environment for the kids, like in a month or two.
Correct. I don't know, a month or two. I don't know when it's going to be, but I think we need a solution. And when we start talking about January, February, I don't think we can plan on having windows open all day long for ventilation.
Can I ask you a question about you? I made the face because the idea of spending funds that haven't been approved at town meeting makes me cringe just a little bit, because then you'd have to come up with the funds out of your budget. I don't totally know the rules of the non-lapsing fund. Does that have to go to town meeting too in order for you to spend it if it's appropriated?
Yes, that's why I said it's connected to the next one. So,
all right. I was hoping that if it took right out of there, you could skip the town meeting.
Yeah, you can't. The Board of Finance with a non-lapsing fund can approve up to $20,000 without going to town meeting. Anything over $20,000 has to go to town meeting.
Is the
hang on, hang on. Matt, got his hand up.
No, I'm good.
You're good? Okay, Lisa, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Phil, was there any air balancing test done? Is the building really airtight?
No, we did not.
That's right. Okay, thank you.
Lisa, why are you asking that?
Because if a building isn't airtight, air is getting in. Because usually I can remember being, well, it doesn't even matter, the building that I'm in, the heat goes on, the windows get open. So, I think water damage and things, that will all happen. It just, for me, it just seems too like, oh my gosh, we have to do it for COVID. And the children matter. I'm not saying the children don't matter. It just, if we do all of this and then there's these big gaping holes and there's the hoods that have to be replaced and things aren't done well because the job was rushed, we now have to fix that again. And we couldn't even get a consensus on building a building. So I'm fearful of that.
So I think there's some strong points there, Lisa. And I think one of the advantages we have, although the window is very narrow, one of the advantages we have right now is if we take an action tonight, we're not spending the money tonight. We're taking an action that starts a process. In the meantime, while this process goes along, we're going to get into the meat of what is probably going to be the make or break season for the schools. As the superintendent said, which I agree, he was thinking we'd already be closed for the winter. And so far, it's great. We haven't had to do that.
Right, because we're wearing masks.
We're going to cross over a pass-fail point. We don't know what day that's going to be, but we're going to cross over a pass-fail sometime during this winter. We won't know it until we're way past it, probably. But if it comes soon, it'll come before this money's spent anyway. In which case, this may have the option to say, well, time out. The school shut down now. Maybe we need to do something different. Or maybe, so we, it's not like we're writing the check tonight. We may, and we may not. We may have the time that happens during this procurement process before it's committed. We may also find that we're doing well enough and the flu season isn't bad and we're going to get through the winter with kids in school, in which case we know we're doing the right thing. Or we may shut the schools down, in which case maybe the superintendent comes up with a new plan or a new strategy, or not.
Yeah, all of them are not ideal. And I'm not trying to be somebody throwing the wrench in. I'm just saying anything that gets rushed is always it doesn't end well.
I 100% agree with that. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Matt?
Yeah, I was wondering, we have our practicing engineer here, Mr. Toulis. I was wondering if you have an opinion on this.
I can hear you, Matt. What'd you
I was
say?
wondering if Mr. Toulis has an opinion on this, the practicing engineer.
Well, as a subject matter expert, I guess I'll give Mr. Toulis a moment if he wants to comment. Ralph, are you listening?
He may have signed off for a little while.
Ralph, show thyself.
No.
Okay. He just wants us to see his little tile on the screen. Okay.
Mike, can I just address, and I understand your comment, Lisa, about the airtight test. It's not about airtightness. It's about the number of air exchanges that need to occur on an hourly basis.
That's right.
And if we can't show that, it's not about kids. It's about kids, but it's also about staff being.
It wasn't in place prior. If you don't have an air balancing test that works in your building now, you didn't have it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or last year.
Correct.
Which means that you didn't have good air exchange in your bathrooms and your exhaust systems all throughout the whole building. So putting it under a guise of COVID, it just doesn't sit well. All I'm saying is I'm not trying to be somebody who stonewalls the project. I was for building a better a building for the town and the kids. I was pro that. I am not so, I don't believe this has to be rushed. To me, it doesn't sit well. It just doesn't sit well at all.
Lisa, your point is well taken. And I do agree with your concern. I think we understand it. Let's keep this conversation moving.
Got it.
Erica, go ahead.
Mr. Toulis doesn't have a microphone hooked up. He's just listening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Well, then she'll carry on. Christina, I think I saw you wave your hand there somewhere along the way.
Yeah, it just occurred to me because we're doing some construction projects at our house and materials aren't available. And I'm just wondering if there's going to be a huge run on these units, because probably a lot of other towns have schools that need them too. And it'll be maybe the town would say, okay, let's do this, but we can't get the units in. And so
Most towns don't have a reserve like we do, so they can't order them right now because they don't have any money.
Well,
Good point.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
So listen, I need to be clear because it's, if I can't get them, I can't get them. But realize that for me to leave schools open and follow the reopening guidelines and DPH's guidelines, I
Right,
have
yeah.
to have some fresh air in those classrooms.
You have to start.
And so if I can't maintain a certain temperature in those classrooms, we're going to close. It's not even about heat. I can't crank the heat and leave the windows open. And if my teachers, if you think my staff is not going to look at, and this comes back to, I have a smart staff, they're looking at ventilation. They question ventilation from day one, and we have responded. If we don't respond to this, you got me.
Matt?
Yeah, so confirming that you've already looked into other options, other possibilities, putting them in different rooms, using double, closing off areas, opening up areas. You've already looked at all that stuff and that is impossible?
So at Hall School, the 12 classrooms that all of our students are in, our students are not moving at Hall. They stay in that classroom for their COVID schedules. The remainder of the building doesn't have that number of classes, and the teachers move. So like the rest of the building, because it was updated or it was an addition, has ventilation. The bathrooms have ventilation, but those 12 classrooms do not. So I have 2 science labs next to each other on opposite ends of the building that have proper ventilation. But for me to rotate 3 classes through, I have to have them next to each other so we can monitor kids. So I just don't have the space in the remainder of the building to do that.
I understand, thank you.
Okay, technical question here. I believe typically in situations like this, we make a motion that refers to getting the funds from general reserve. Is that correct? Anybody? Bueller?
Donna?
Donna?
Fund balance, right?
Okay, I'm sorry. Fund balance.
Yep.
So you were right the first time.
Yeah, I tried too hard. Okay. I'm gonna take a shot at this. I move that we approve the expenditure of up to $135,000 from the fund balance for the Willington Public Schools to install ventilation relative to COVID-19 at both, with all available grant funds to be used for reimbursement. Am I on track with that?
It sounds good, except instead of approving the expenditure, I would say
Recommend.
appropriating. Yep, you are recommending an appropriation
Since
of
it has to be a town vote.
$135,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Donna, what if,
Recommending it to somebody? Are we recommending it to the Board of Selectmen for them to call a town meeting? Or are we just recommending the expenditure and then the process falls along?
correct. Donna, what if they approve the non-lapsing fund money? I'm just trying to make it so it's between that the town doesn't have to spend a dime, is what I'm trying to, that is not from the general fund. If it comes from if you do this from non-lapsing fund money and grant funds money, if you approve the non-lapsing fund, it could be
Yes.
from both. I don't know if I have other things in the grant. And so I just don't know if I'm going to be able to cover everything out of the grant. That's my only concern.
Well, that's why I said available, but also I assumed that 173,781 from non-lapsing was earmarked for something else. Is that not true?
No, it's all part of these projects and reopening.
Okay,
Okay, then it makes sense to spend it out of the non-lapsing fund, because then you're not spending new money, you're spending old money.
But that's only if they approve that. Donna.
Right.
Because
That's
there's
true.
30,000 in there.
okay.
You'd want to hold this motion up because you don't want to appropriate funds that aren't
It
available.
has not gotten a second yet anyway, so Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't, I have no idea what a non-lapsing fund is, but that's besides the point. So if the money isn't spent, what Phil is saying here, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we didn't spend all of our money last year. So we want that money to be deposited into something called a non-lapsing fund. Now, it's my understanding that if money isn't spent, it goes back into the reserve fund. So it's money is fungible. It makes no difference.
Where that 173,781, Donna, where is that right now?
General fund.
Okay, and was it factored into our budget construction for this year, or was it reserved off to the side? For the
It
current,
was, yes, it was factored in because while we thought that we were going to give money back, how did we leave the Board of Ed? That we planned it. We thought they were going to spend their budget in full when we forecasted our fund balance, and that didn't happen. They turned money back. Right, so this is not a part of our discussion at budget time.
so this is additional fund balance that we had not counted in our calculation for setting the mill rate.
Mike, you have $459,000 back from the Board of Education that was not factored in to your fund, to your balance.
Right, and you had talked earlier on in the process that you had earmarked some or expected to spend some of that already, right?
So no, I can't, because what I'm going to ask of that 459,000 is that 173,000, which is 2% of the budget, would come back to the Board of Ed for this exact project, this type
Understood.
of project,
Okay.
and COVID items. Yep.
All right, so based on that new information, that messes with the wording of the budget, the motion that I proposed, right? So,
Can I give you a thought?
yes, please.
It may make sense, like Erica just said, to have the non-lapsing fund discussion, because then if you approve that, you could then basically say all of it's going to come out of the non-lapsing fund and apply whatever grant money you can, and the remainder would stay in the non-lapsing fund.
Okay. So let's move to agenda item new business 1B. My motion did not get a second, so that's dead on arrival, which is fine. Let's talk about the non-lapsing fund, which I think we just did talk about.
What's a non-lapsing fund?
So Matt,
I
the
mean,
non,
Carries-
I
Go
can
ahead.
share, Mike. So the non-lapsing fund is basically, there's a statute that allows towns to, and boards of ed, to, if they have unexpected education funds at the end of the school year, they can request that from their Board of Finance up to 3%. You can't go over 3%. And it basically goes into a non-lapsing fund. You can, it used to be a 1% account. Now it's a 2% account. You can request up to 2% of your allocated budget. And that money then goes into basically an education fund for contingencies. The Board of Ed cannot spend it without going through the Board of Finance and all of the other protocols. So right now there's $30,000, Donna, correct me if I'm wrong, in the non-lapsing fund. If I had an outplacement, and this is what districts do, if I had an outplacement come in, move into town tomorrow for special education, and it was 125,000, this is the account you would want to draw that from. And it doesn't impact your budget. So and this was my recommendation to the Board of Ed, was to ask for the full 2%, which is 173,000, which is what the number that Mike is sharing. And that number, basically the 173 plus the 30 that's in there, could be used for this project and all of our other non-budgeted COVID-related expenses. Anything that's not in the non-lapsing fund, you could approve as a Board of Finance, as long as it's not over $20,000 in 1 year. If it is, it has to go through Board of Finance, and it has to go through town meeting. So that's the intent. Is really was, I think when this started, and Erica, you might have been on the board when this came about, but was around special education. But now basically what they say is special education and, non-recurring things that come off.
I think it's unexpected expenses.
Right,
It was a
unanticipated.
way to meet MBR is what it was.
Well, I think that's the way Burlington Board of Finance looked at it. That's not necessarily why the statute,
Well, it's
What's-
the way we,
right?
that's how we instituted it. That's how it was sold to us.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, I was surprised that we had a meeting, Phil, a Board of Ed meeting, which I didn't go to on the 8th, where this was discussed. And then the day of this meeting, we get a request for a non-lapsing fund and a transfer of funds. And I wish I had had more time to digest this.
I think the board approved this in September,
Yeah,
this one.
yeah.
And the budget that's in there, so it works off the budget appropriation. And I'm not sure, Mike, I sent you the motion today? Did you,
Right.
did that went out to the board? It was late. But it was.
Right, but Brenda reached out to me. I'm looking back in emails. In the material that I forwarded with the agenda yesterday to the board members. But Brenda reached out to me a while ago asking, she reached out to me on the 30th of September asking to be on the agenda for school ventilation and 2% non-lapsing fund.
The motion, Mike, you sent just before this meeting started. I think that's what Phil's
Right.
talking about.
Yeah, that was.
Yes, the
Yeah.
greater detail with the dollars and all is something that came out today, and I did,
Correct.
yes. Yeah, that came out at 6:45.
Yeah, so the 1920 budget appropriation was $8,689,095. 2% of that would be $173,781. We can't go over the 3% of that budget number, which would be $260,672. And we currently have $30,552. So your number you couldn't go over would be 260, and there would be basically 203,000 in that account. And the intent is, again, for COVID basically purchases, any of the things that we are unbudgeted items.
With the stipulation that some of that will be reimbursed, but we just don't know what it's going to be yet.
Correct,
Well, I mean,
correct. And that's,
let's make that, like I said, I wish we would have seen this before today, but let's make the motion for to approve Phil's suggestion, to approve a 2% transfer to the non-lapsing fund for $173,000. Let's get that passed, and then after that, we'll move to the other one, which is the heat transfer.
Okay, so why don't, so let's word it according to what's on the page here. So I'll make a motion that we transfer $173,781 to the non-lapsing education fund from the approved fiscal year 1920 Board of Education budget appropriation for the purpose of future Board of Education unexpected expenses.
Second,
COVID expenses.
Well, that's not, yeah, it's unexpected expense because that legally that fund is allowed to be used for outplacements and all those other things.
Okay, all right, I got it.
So
And
you
by
don't
the
want to
way-
pigeonhole the certain amount of dollars within the total.
Yeah, I understand. And by the way, so, and then expenditures more than $20,000 will come before the Board of Finance?
correct.
That's
That's
seconded,
statute, yeah.
or Stephanie seconded.
Any expenditures have to come before the Board of Finance.
Yes,
Right.
right. The 20,000
Sorry.
could be approved within the board. Okay,
Correct.
so discussion on the motion. All right, Marissa, would you call us a vote, please?
Matt,
Aye.
Christina.
That looked like an aye.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't looking at her. Okay, Stephanie,
aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Lisa,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye. Okay, so back to item A. Thank you. That motion carries, obviously. Back to item A, the ventilation systems. So Phil, based on how you steered us that next part of the discussion, I think the revision of the motion I had floated before would be that essentially the Board of Finance would approve an appropriation of $135,000 from the Board of Education, I'm sorry, the non-lapsing education fund. And then with the same for Wellington Public Schools to install ventilation relative to COVID-19 at both schools. And then we don't really even have to talk about the grant, right? Because you're going to feed the grant back into that no matter what, your grant funds are going to refill wherever possible.
Correct.
Okay, I'm going to try to.
Donna, does that make sense to you?
Yes, but you're recommending that the Board of Selectmen are going to call a town meeting for this appropriation because it's over 20,000.
Okay, Matt, go ahead.
Can we have that? I mean, the ability to have a town meeting is in question because it's getting colder and colder. How long would this be? I haven't done this enough. How long would it be before we have a town meeting?
So the Board of Selectmen would at their next meeting make the call for the town meeting.
And then it would be a week after that.
On the
Right?
days, they have to have a certain amount of days in between when they call it publicly and when the meeting can happen. So you're talking about the minimum, well, I don't know exactly what day their next meeting is. I think it's Monday, is it?
Our next meeting is Monday, and then we'll have to get into the paper if it's approved then next week. And then we're right up against the election. So I don't know. We'll have to take a look at what the date can be.
It's a couple weeks out anyway.
It might send my town clerk right over the edge.
Sorry.
I'll send her your way.
I'll send her a present.
Yeah,
Donna, back to your comment, Donna, does that asking the Board of Selectmen to call a town meeting, does that have to be in our motion? Or can we just approve?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was asking for before. Okay. Matt, you had a question?
no.
Okay. So let me try. Donna and Erica, listen to make sure I get this right. I'm going to try it. I move that the Board of Selectmen call a town meeting to approve the appropriation of $135,000 from the non-lapsing education fund for Wellington Public Schools to install ventilation relative to COVID-19 at both schools, period. Did I get that right?
It sounds good.
Thank you.
I think so. I'm just looking at what you did at your last meeting, which would be similar language.
Do we need to refer to public health at all or not?
I think saying relative to COVID-19
Okay, covers it.
it makes it pretty unambiguous.
Yeah, you recommend the Board of Selectmen call a town meeting for the following purpose.
Yep, that's basically what I said. Marissa, did you get that?
all set.
Thank you. Okay, can I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion on the motion. All right, let's go to a vote. Marissa?
Lisa,
Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
thank you. I'm looking at the document rather than Matt,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Stephanie,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
motion carries.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your efforts.
So regarding town meeting, I mean, if we're gonna have a town meeting, it's gonna be November before we have it, and it's gonna be awful cold. Can we have that town meeting in the gymnasium of Hall School as opposed to going and doing it outdoors?
I'm shaking my head no, based on the already information we received from the superintendent. The school is, with the exception of our polling place, the school is not open to outside use. Is that correct, Phil?
Yeah, that's correct.
It's not an outside use, it's a town.
It- It is outside of school use,
People in one space even.
right?
The town meeting
We-
about putting ventilation through the school.
The Board of, I mean, they have policies for the school. The school isn't authorizing use of it for extracurricular sports or parent functions or any of their own things. So the answer is,
You have to clean it if all those people go in it.
right.
Right, we do have a couple other spaces that we can use if we have to. Hopefully they're big enough.
Well, and I will say the problem is if we were to get 100+ people, we do not have a place big enough for social distancing inside, which is why we've held it outside, which is why myself and others are asking for a hybrid model from the state.
Right.
So,
You can't have 100 people in one room anyway.
yeah, we don't have a space that would allow us to social distance that many people. It's just the gym as well.
Okay, that's it for new business. Correspondence, you all got all the correspondence in email. So present to speak. We do have a couple of members of the public still hanging on with us. So anyone who's on video first, wave your hand if you want to speak. All right, so those of you who do not show a video screen, who either come up as a name or I guess nobody's in on phone based on what I can see on my screen here. So anyone else, please unmute if you would like to speak. Call out your name. All right, thank you. I have 3 items, I think, for good and welfare. One, town email instability. Erica or Phil, I've been on the board for, I guess, well, 3 years at least. And it's sort of a regular thing that we have annoying problems with the email. Is there anything we can do to make it more stable? You know, we've had between email and phones, there seems like there's been a lot of trouble lately.
I can speak to that. So one of the items that Eric and I have been talking about for a while regarding the email is adjusting our system. We just added on all of our students to be able to have the capacity to email within the WillingtonCT.org. And so as a result of that, they can only send and receive within that. They can't get emails from outside. But one of the things I'm looking at is because of COVID and because of the changes that we've had with the email system with our students, we're looking at the potential of using some of our Title IV grant money that allows for the purchase of a server. That email server is dated, and that's part of the issue right now. And so I actually, on, what is today? Today's Thursday. On Tuesday, I talked to Novus, and they are getting me quotes for a new server. It would help our email system because communication is critical right now, especially for our remote learners, because those students have email systems. A new server would clean up a lot of the issues. Unfortunately, some of our other issues that have happened connected to the phones were just related to power outages. It's connected to our servers, and if one has gone down, it's impacted the phones. So the plan right now is a new server for the email system, and it would impact all of WillingtonCT.org.
Okay, and what about some UPS protection for the server as well that might help provide some stability?
It is. So that's one of the UPSs actually got cooked in the last storm, and we just replaced that. And so we're looking at a couple of the other UPSs are also old, and so they're looking at those as well. Those are nothing compared to the cost of a server, though.
All right.
And we've talked about moving some of those server items out of this facility and moving them to Hall School. So everything will be located in one place, and they have a generator backup, which we do not have here.
Yeah, they're also looking at the potential for hosting, just having a cloud server, because there's a lot more security, and they can
and
Don't need to
backups.
be on site. There's a lot of, you know, pluses to that. So we're looking at all those options, but yes, we're very aware. My staff lets me know when the email is down for sure.
What's a UPS?
Uninterrupted power supply.
Oh,
Really
sorry.
battery backup.
I thought it was a delivery system.
Um,
In a way it is.
In a way.
Okay. Also, my apologies to those of you who are attention to detail oriented who noticed the board members. I sent you an agenda that by mistake had September at the top of it for the month. For those of you who didn't notice, don't worry about it. And so I apologize for that. I did get it correct with the help of the town clerk before it went out to the public. So the one that went to the public was correct.
Our reputation is intact.
Yes.
She's on to you though.
Yes. I could tell by the tone of voice. And just a general health comment for the good and welfare of our people here on the board and our town is numbers, positivity rate numbers are climbing a little bit everywhere. We know we're heading into flu season. Everyone just be careful and take care of yourselves. That's it. Anyone else have anything for good and welfare?
Wear your mask.
That's a great way to take care of yourself and others.
If you come here, wear a mask.
All right. Can I get a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Good night and thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.